I've hit the record button. I want to welcome everyone today to today's speaker series in November. We have Sohi joining us here, and she's going to talk more about amplifying your voice. To those of you who are not familiar with LEAD, we are a TRG here at UA, leading and empowering Asian development. I'm Alyssa, I'm one of the co-chairs, but I'm joined here by a lot of our leadership team. I see Matt, Craig, Samir, Kristen. I bet there are other people who I haven't seen yet as I scroll down the participant list. But yeah, without further ado, I'm probably going to hand this off to Sohi. I'll just quickly give everyone a quick intro for Sohi. So as an executive coach and leadership development expert, Sohi works with emerging leaders and executives to unleash their untapped power for themselves and their teams. And during her 20 years in the corporate world, she has helped leaders transform themselves from frustrated executives to insightful, impactful, and inspired leaders who are engaging employees in exciting new ways and driving their organizations to great success. Most recently, Sohi served as an executive director of organization development and change management at Warner Bros. Entertainment, and she previously held internal leadership positions at Countrywide Financial Corporation and Jacobs Engineering Group, as well as various HR consulting positions at Jet Proportion Laboratory and Washington Mutual. As a passionate expert, Sohi helps her clients hone their vision, realize their full potential, create synergy throughout their organization, and make positive and lasting differences. So welcome, Sohi, to our UA Lead event, and I'll just hand it off to you to take us through your presentation and your talk. And Kristen will be monitoring the chat, so if at any point in time people have questions, comments, please feel free to chime in. Off to you, Sohi.
Thank you so much, Alyssa. I'm so excited. I've actually been really waiting for this day because I have so much to share. But first, thank you, Alyssa. I always like to pay attention to what's shared in my bio because I'm like, wow, I did that. That's kind of reinforcing. It's always a good way to start. So again, thank you all for joining. I know that you are joining in different time zones, so I really appreciate that. And I feel really honored to be here to speak with all of you about really important topics around advocating for yourself, around the challenges of being a parent, and also how do we navigate work-life balance. So we're going to talk about so many of those things, all of those things. And so when Under Armour asked me to come and talk to all of you around those topics, I'm like, absolutely. Oh my gosh, I jumped at it. So again, really excited and happy to be here with all of you. All right, so the thing to share with all of you is that my talks are super interactive. So I am not a talking head. I don't like just blah blahing at you all. I know this is time that is taken away from your calendar and you're here purposefully. So I want to make sure that I'm hitting on the topics and the things that you care about. So what are those things that are really pressing for you, and or the things that would be of value during this time? So get your typing fingers ready. And I'd love to hear from you. What are you most curious about? So I will touch on advocating for yourself. I'll talk about balance and my point of view on balance, being a parent and trying to navigate work and do all of that. So of that and maybe other things that come to mind, what's present for you, what's pressing, and what would you like to learn more about? Share that in chat, please. I'm also very patient. Okay, we have from Susan, how to create boundaries with work-life balance. Okay. Talking about demonstrating leadership at workplace. Mac, that's a good one. So if I don't end up touching on that, please be sure to bring that back up. Okay, so those definitely we'll talk about specifically as it relates to finding work-life balance. So thank you for chiming in. And as you think of topics, please put that in chat. Sabrina, you said prioritizing my family. Certainly, I have experience in that, or I'm constantly trying to do that. Audrey, you said parenting young children and navigating work from home with the big needs of young kids. Oh gosh, that's such a big one. So we'll definitely touch on that, Audrey. Okay, well, this is good to know. We are in the right talk. I'm here talking about the right things, and learning how to advocate for yourself is a key part of that. So that feels like a nice segue into talking and jumping into what I want to share with you from my context and my content. And that is my journey. And I think that given the topic of advocating for yourself, it's worthwhile to go back and share with you my journey here. So that is me when I was around 4 or 5. And my journey really started when I immigrated at the age of 6 to the United States. So you could say that I'm not even first generation, was born in South Korea. And it wasn't a kind of easy move in which my parents sat us down and talked to us for years about this desire to move to the States. It actually felt very radical, very um, chaotic for my 6-year-old self to be plucked out of what I was, used to and my surroundings in South Korea and to come to the United States and landing in Phoenix, Arizona back in 1982. So for me, that felt very, very chaotic. And the first thing I really wanted to do was to assimilate, learn the language, learn this new culture that felt very different from what I knew back in Korea. And, part of that really meant that I was starting to strip away my identity as a South Korean. Um, it meant that I was also hiding parts of myself. It meant that, in my desire to assimilate and learn the language and learn the norms of, not only the US and how people behave, but the regional difference of being in Phoenix, Arizona, of which, our family was probably one of just a handful within the town of Phoenix. It all felt very foreign and quite honestly, very scary. It was a very formative time in which, as I said, I started to hide parts of myself and abandon my South Korean heritage so that I can, feel like I belonged somewhere. And that's a theme throughout my journey and throughout my growth, because I have a deep desire and a need to connect to people. And so how do I stay true and authentic while trying to be a part of a culture? On top of that, I moved every year. So that was, and my adult self today, I say that it was very helpful. It allowed me to be super resourceful and allowed me to build resilience as well. But during that time, it just, when I was actually going through the moves, it didn't feel so good. It was kind of like this abrupt move from Arizona to Colorado to California, and we did that almost every year, every other year. So you can imagine kind of the upheaval that I felt growing up in my formative years. Although today I say that makes me super resilient and very adaptable. That's the optimistic side of me. And, the crux being that I grew up really wanting to fit in, and that really gets to my desire and my superpower of connection and wanting community. And I'm going to fast forward from that little girl to my high school years. I think that there were definite parts of me that grew up wanting to be the good Asian. And, I took all the AP courses to satisfy my parents and show them that I was smart and successful in the ways that I thought they wanted me to be. And, coming from a very traditional Korean family, they had these expectations of me that I really internalized, which is do well in school at all costs, take all of the AP courses, take the courses that are the most challenging, get yourself into a good college. And I was on that trajectory. Whether that was authentic to me or not, it was a trajectory that I was on. But what I will say is that once I landed in college, I went back to Arizona, the University of Arizona, and pursued going to medical school. Like a good Asian, I was doing all of the sciences. I was enrolled in physics and organic chemistry and biochem and all of those things in pursuit of what I thought would lead me to success. in essence what my parents really wanted for me. And it wasn't until about my junior year that I really said, listen, this is not what feels authentic to me. This doesn't feel genuine. Could I do this life? Could I be a doctor? Sure. I can put in the hours, I can put in the time, I can grind it out and get my medical degree. But when I really stopped and got quiet, I felt this calling to do something different that was really risque at the time. And it was a field that most people didn't even know about, was not really readily out there. It was the field of industrial organizational psychology, or organizational psychology as we know it today. And back then it was just burgeoning. And what I knew was that I knew enough that I wanted to pursue the psychology aspect because I was super curious and innately curious about people. And so this is the start of when I started to advocate for myself. And so when, in the chat, Julia put learning how to advocate for yourself. I think one of the really key things and the hardest things for me was learning to do that with my own family system. That put a lot of pressure on me to be a certain way, to be the good Asian, to go to college and excel and to do all of the top courses and go to all of the top colleges that parents may put on us, whether they do that consciously or not. It's something that I think a lot of us, and especially culturally, can relate to. And my story and my desire to advocate for myself really kicked in at this point in my college years, where I was like, look, this is going to be something that I pursue for a really long time. I don't want to do something that doesn't give me energy, that doesn't feel authentic to me, and that I don't want to wake up every day, feeling like it's a grind. So I would say I was lucky enough to find that early on, and then not only find it, but kind of buck the familial system and say, hey, parents, I know you have dreams for me, but my dreams look a little bit different. And I kid you not, I was scared. I was terrified of switching course, of the years I invested up until then in college to pursue a field that nobody really knew about. That what is this marriage of psychology and business, and what is this thing that you want to do? And um, what I knew at that time was I needed to be able to help explain it to them. So I wrote it in English, and I got a translator to translate it in Korean so that my parents could really understand that this was a deep desire of mine. So all that to say, I think that advocating for yourself, and we'll get more to this and unpack it in much more detail, it starts with really tuning into what you know to be true for you based on your values, and taking small risks and what I call micro steps and micro actions to make your move or step forward. And that starts with really understanding what is it that you want and getting clear with that, and then putting words to that and being able to speak on your behalf. So more of that a little bit later, but I wanted to share my journey because I think it's important to understand where I've been, to see where I am now, and that advocating for yourself is a practice and a habit. So who am I today? Well, I am a single mother of three lovely children. They are my greatest accomplishment, if I can say that. That's Tyler in the middle. He's my oldest. He's 12. I have Emma, my middle, and she's 10. Oh, by the way, she is a badass hockey player. She's a goalie, and I could not be more tickled with the fact that she is who I wanted to be at 10. My goodness. She's so confident, and I love that about her. And then Noah, who's 7, and he is all boy, very much about jumping and sports and like jumping all over me, and very, very charismatic as well. So those are my children. And I'm also a leadership coach and a leadership development expert. As Alyssa said, I've been doing this work for over 20 years now, with, as she shared, a lot of great companies internally. So I spent 15 years doing this type of work internally with companies like Warner Media, where I led the internal or the domestic OD and change management team. And then I took the leap to be external and start my own firm about 5 years ago, really specializing in working with emerging leaders and highly ambitious women. And the niche of working with emerging leaders came about when I was internal, and I saw that a lot of the coaching and a lot of the support went to the top of the house, the SVPs, the EVPs, the CEOs, which is great, and they need that support. But really, I found that those coming up the pipeline, the emerging leaders, the directors, the VPs who want to take on more and who want to who want to be better and the best leaders that they can be, they didn't have as much support. So that's where I really hone in, because I was one when I was internal. I led teams. I know the unique challenges of what it's like to try to manage up and influence, and also try to have to manage your team as well. So that's my career. I'm also best-selling author of Mommy Tracked: How to Take Authentic Risks and Define Success on Your Terms. And I wrote this book and was published last fall. And this book is really a combination of my lived experience about how I took starting with small risks to bigger risks that felt authentic to me, and really brushing up against what society deems successful, like the typical path of climbing the ranks, which is also great as well, but didn't feel authentic to me. And so the book is about how do you really define what that looks like for you and take the risks to achieve that and get there. So that's the book. I'm also an entrepreneur, as I shared, and I'm a creative as well. The part I love about my job and what I do is that it allows me to be super creative with the solutions I provide to my clients. And also I work with creatives in the film and production and entertainment space as well. So that is fast forwarding, obviously, to where I am today. But what's not shared is all of the in-between years, between the little to high school to college to where I am now, and all of the different risks I took that has helped me be on this path, and all the ways in which I advocated for myself to be able to be here with you all today. All right. So I think that now part of what I want to do here is just acknowledge the collective experience that we've all had over the past year and a half. I think it would be a disservice if we didn't just pause for a second and go, oh my gosh, we've all been through a lot, right? So let me ask you, this is a question for all of you. Get your typing fingers ready, or you can come off mute and share with me. What words or word would you use to describe the past year and a half? What comes to mind when I say, what was the past year and a half like for you? Okay. Challenging and uncomfortable. A lot. Francis, you said isolating, anxious, unpredictable, very busy but isolating. Yep. Catherine, you say overwhelming. There's a lot of that. Overwhelming, chaotic. Alyssa, you say stressful. And I'd love to hear from one of you that perhaps put it in chat. If I can hone in on Louisette, I hope I'm saying your name right. You said frustration. I'm wondering if you can come off mute and tell us a little bit more about why.
Yeah, just at how much longer this seems to have endured than, it could have been controlled more readily, more easily, with more cooperation, with better leadership in general.
Yeah, absolutely. It probably felt like, okay, in the beginning or the start of the pandemic and the quarantine, we're like, hey, well, it'll probably last a year or two, a month or two. And then here we are, a year and a half into it and still navigating through it. So I understand definitely that word and the feeling of frustration. Allison, you say awakening and chaotic. Tell us more about that. I love those words, awakening and chaotic.
Hello, can you hear me? Well, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I'm in the car. I'm multitasking.
Be safe.
I think talk about balance, right?
Yeah.
So I think just in hindsight, right? With everything going on in the world, there is a piece of it where you can start to kind of count the simple blessings and what's really important in life. So that's the awakening piece. But then I think chaotic with just all the shifts of, as simple as like quarantine and vaccinations and where you can and can't go, and then you can't go here, and then you can go here, and then just all the ups and downs in the workplace. I work in the retail space, so just a lot of ebbs and flows with everything going on the last year and a half.
Yeah, Allison, thank you so much for sharing that. I would have you. It was certainly points where you're like, wow, there might be some things I might do differently going forward. And that's the awakening piece that allowed the piece of the quarantine and the pandemic where it forced us to slow down and maybe reflect on a few things. And then, yes, it's certainly been chaotic. It's been ever changing and probably like a roller coaster ride of like do's and don'ts and how do we, navigate through this. So I wholeheartedly agree with you. And then I love what Max said. There have been some upside, which is of no commute. Like I'm in LA, and trust me when I say I do not miss the not having a commute. Being able to jump on and be here with all of you through a virtual method is so one of the upsides of this. And I realize that, and I feel super fortunate. So no commute is a great thing. And then also being able to manage the fact that we can do this virtually, right? And manage our schedule, because that's also leading to burnout. So when we do too much of something, there's also the shadow side of that. But I do recognize that there's a positive in that too. And Tandra, you said insightful and ever-changing, depressing. Yes, thank you for sharing all of that in chat. All of that is true. All of those words, those emotions, those feelings about the past year are right on. And I will add a few more, which is if it's been stressful, absolutely right. If you felt disconnected, yes, because we were told to disconnect from what we knew, from our families, from our friends, from roommates, all of the ways in which we were connecting every day. At the drop of a hat, we were told to not do that. And it does feel chaotic. And it's certainly very rapid in the way that it was morphing, the information and things we had to do to keep safe. And most of all, it felt super exhausting. And I don't know if any of you felt that or still feel that, because there are some days where I still feel that it's very exhausting to maintain this and try to navigate this. And I think that without recognizing all of that, it's really hard to move forward and be our best selves at work and in our lives, and to advocate for ourselves and to try to balance it all without really addressing some of the emotional components of what this past year and a half has really brought forward. So thank you for that, and thank you for sharing that, because that's all honest and real. And here's why. I mean, I'm sure there's more things. On a macro level, goodness, of course, the pandemic, it was a time of, and still continues to be in many ways, disconnection, right? We need to disconnect from literally our lives in the way that we were living it. And it brought on big disruption. That's another D word. And also the third D word, which is discoveries. It brought about some discoveries for us as well, which, we alluded to earlier, some awakenings. And we still continue to navigate the pandemic, and we're all probably adjusted to working in this way. And we're trying to optimize it for ourselves, both at work and at home. And we'll unpack that as well. Layer onto that, we have social unrest, which really came to a head with George Floyd, the death of George Floyd. And I would say even before that, there were undercurrents probably that really set this ablaze. And take that coupled with Stop Asian Hate and all of the different movements that happened in between. There was a lot. There was also political tensions that we can't ignore. It was a time of changeover, a handover, and navigating through that. And then, oh yeah, let's add to that the workforce changes that we were experiencing. So the reason why I call this out is that if you're feeling any of the stuff that we shared in chat and all the feelings, there is a reason for that. All of these things in and of themselves, take one thing in our lifetime adds to a tremendous amount of stress. The pandemic in and of itself, we collectively went through that, which is really unique. And then add social unrest, and then add the political tensions, and then add the workforce changes. My goodness, I hope you are all giving yourself grace and compassion through this time, because it's really what's needed to keep going. Okay. And then Craig, you said life became the priority over work over the course of the pandemic. Yeah, life. How do we navigate life? How do we keep our heads about ourselves? How do we keep moving forward day to day, really, with all the different challenges that were happening? On top of the macro trends, we have to address the micro trends. Let's click down a level and talk about what was going on for our personal lives. With the workforce changes, gosh, that meant that literally our work and personal life was clashing. So no longer were we in an office space where we could easily compartmentalize, right? Before we're like, okay, we're gonna leave the home stuff at home and drive and do some sort of commute into work. And that allowed us to process and compartmentalize the two worlds. But that came crashing together when we literally had to find our kitchen tables. Some of us were working out of our bedrooms, maybe even in the bathroom or in the garage or in a coffee place if they were open, and everything in between. And that allowed us also to see into some of the ways in which our colleagues and coworkers were managing and navigating, and saw the kids and saw the pets and all of the extended family members in the background, literally. And guess what that allowed us to do? That allowed us to actually have grace for each other, because we were navigating this together. It not only gave us insight into our colleagues' lives, broadened the purview of the ways in which we were interacting. We saw that they were going through challenges. We were all collectively going through it together. And so while the work and personal life was clashing up front, it allowed us, hopefully, to give ourselves grace with all three kids of mine, jumping into my Zoom every now and then and asking and demanding things of me as I was in a meeting. And I think that many of you can relate to that. And, there's also the changing work expectations. So because there were so many upsides to being able to work virtually, many of us thought that we should do that all day long. And really, what are the expectations of working from home and virtually? So all of that was changing, in addition to the pandemic stuff and our personal and work lives clashing. And then some of you might have also experienced new teams, maybe a new role, maybe a new boss, and all of that in the past year and a half. And maybe joining Under Armour and this company during the pandemic. So that is a different experience than being able to, be there in person and connect with people and colleagues in a traditional way. So all of these things happened and have happened and are happening to, add a little bit of stress, I would say, into our lives. And so if you're feeling that, that's okay. I think we all are to some degree. And so where does that leave us? Well, the question then is, how do we manage all of this, especially for parents? Like, how do we navigate through this? How do we, put our best foot forward so that our children and our kid or kids they're okay, and that they're getting what they need as well? So let me ask you, how many of you are parents or are a parent? And I think, Alyssa, you said the poll's not working. Is that right?
Yeah, the poll option, unfortunately, is not working. So maybe we can do a fun option. We can either just put our answers in the chat, or everyone who's a parent just throw out a thumbs up in the emoticon thing.
Yeah, please do. I see a lot of thumbs up. Mm-hmm. Yes. I think a lot of us are looking around and scrolling through the screens. All right. Okay. So I would love to hear from the parents, what's been the most challenging aspect this year and a half? What's been the most challenging thing for you? Please share that in chat or come off mute and let me know.
So this is Kristen. Just over the past year, it all culminated myself. My son last month he had 3 back-to-back close contact quarantines. Essentially missed, I think it was like 12 days of school in the month of October. So that was basically everything of the past year and a half condensed into 1 month for me of trying to struggle between work, not having the childcare, not even being able to ask anyone for childcare because we were in a close contact quarantine. So that was not a fun time, but just as an example of every emotion and every word that people have used to describe, all condensed into those 3 weeks.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. That sounds super stressful. So I definitely hear that. And, obviously the safety and health of your kids, right? As that being a top concern. Absolutely. Yeah. We'll talk about that as well. And then going to chat, it says, gosh, a lot around mental fatigue. How do we separate work from home? Or it says separating work from home when the kids get home from daycare. Yep. Uncertainty over elementary school quarantine, emotional fatigue, attempting to shelter my children from what is happening in the world around us so they can remain focused on being a child and not worrying. I do have a perspective on that, Jeanette. I'm happy to share that too, which is, I think that there is a way to create awareness for our kids that is appropriate for their age. And it's certainly not to make them worry and put anxiety on them, but that's the extent to which you can remain calm as a parent. And we can talk about that as well, because that's something that I try to practice, is not giving my anxiety and putting that on my children unnecessarily. But they also are aware of the things that are going on around them, and maybe they hear news or pick up on things, because they're so astute and they pick up on so much more than we think they do. See, it's being able to give them the highlights without all of the gory details in a way that is appropriate for their age. That takes practice, but I definitely hear that. Seem to be working longer hours. Gosh, don't I know it, Andrea? It's like I feel like I'm on this Zoom or WebEx or Teams or Hangouts all day long. And again, the upside is like we can do that, but goodness, that is not great for our stamina, and really in the long run, it leads to burnout. Remote school and work last year was brutal, not being able to give work and kids 100% at the same time. Yeah, that's what happens when we try to balance it all, Andrew, and I'm going to get to that. Finding safe, creative, and active things to do that allows for distancing. My gosh, that was such a challenge. Absolutely. Because the kids, at least my kids, they wanted connection and they dearly missed their friends. But what I know is I was really thankful for, at least this is, I think, one of the few times. I mean, I love having 3 kids and there's joy, but I was really glad for having 3, because when they were asked to be distanced, they had at least each other. My heart went out to those parents that had single kids, because I think they really felt it in a different way. Let's see, fear around protecting our kids while keeping a normal routine. My kids are older, trying to help my daughter and new granddaughter. Yeah, all of that fatigue from parenting and working at the same time with toddlers. Goodness, so many challenges. Let's get to it. Gosh, we're just going to start unpacking this. This gets to what you all have shared around the fatigue, right? In the past year and a half, we were literally, as parents, asked to wear not only our parent hat, but oh, by the way, you had to quickly then become the chef. Maybe you felt like the cafeteria lady or the cafeteria dad, But I know I did. It was like switching from not having to make their lunches because the school provided it to then I have to make your breakfast and lunch and then do dinner as well. Not only that, we were moving to the graphic here, we had to keep our kids moving a little bit because I don't know about you all, but I felt like, okay, there's no way that you are all sitting here all day on Zoom doing school and then going to play video games online. I wanted to make sure that they got outside. And so that meant, okay, gosh, I've become their PE teacher. And on top of that, I was there somewhat of a friend as well because they didn't have their real friends. It was like I was their cruise ship director. Okay, now you can talk to Jimmy on FaceTime, and now we can do a drive-by here so that I can at least help them feel connected to their friends. And it was such a challenge to try to do that. And then, yes, trying to, keep a happy front or at least emotionally stable enough so that they felt like there wasn't that much disruption. Tundra, did you like that cruise ship director? I mean, that's really what it was. It's like on every given day, I had a list of activities and things to try to keep them engaged. And during this time, I have to tell you, I grew so much appreciation for teachers. And not that I didn't have that, but it made me empathize even more with the importance of the teachers and the work that they do. So family, and then of course, there were the actual care needs of you had to cut their hair, make sure they were bathing, doing all of these things that normally we would, what I call outsource, right? And outsource the hair cutting, going to the dentist, all the other things, but now you were the person doing all of that. And the biggest one of all, I would say, is this one, which is being the emotional social regulator and or quote unquote counselor for our kids. I don't share this often, but I think it's really warranted here in that the past year and a half for my kids were difficult in different ways. I think my 7-year-old was young enough, he was 6 at the time, that when this started, the pandemic started, I had to be on Zoom with him from like 9 to 12. And that's a long time for a 6-year-old. And it really became so apparent that he and I we were not good. I was like, listen, I'm not a good teacher. I was getting very short. I was not understanding why he couldn't sit still and trying to have grace, but also being very frustrated because I knew work was calling too. I almost felt like it was just like this really big spike of emotions of like, okay, be grateful, but also being irritated that I had to do this and not understanding how much longer. So there was a lot going on inside of me while trying to be emotionally there for my 6-year-old and trying to keep him on task with all the different Zooms and the PE and the music and the art. It was really challenging. That was my 6-year-old, now 7-year-old. My daughter thankfully had sports as an outlet because hockey is it was allowed once a week with all the safety precautions, and so she was still able to continue with that and keep some semblance of normalcy. But my oldest, who I call my empath, he felt the weight of the world. He was going through puberty at the time. He and all of the different ways that the city was asked to shut down in LA, the last round of shutdowns last year was really hard on him. And it was a time in which he said to me for the first time ever that he wanted to see a professional to talk about all of the anxiety and the emotions that he was feeling and the disconnection and the dysregulation. And so as a mom, I perked up and I made sure that I got him the help he needed. And maybe some of you all can relate to this, but it was a very scary and trying time because of course you want your kids to feel some normalcy and you're trying to be that kind of protector for them. So not only did I have to go through this time feeling uncertain of how I can help him because this was the first time that he said this, but knowing that he voiced it and I was thankful for that, I was able to get him the help he needed so that another person, whether, I mean, it was through Zoom, but another person can help him through this better than I could as a parent. And sometimes it's knowing, who to go to and how to do that and doing it creatively and calling on all your resources. And again, that's that's what we do as parents. And so this past year and a half has been so mind-blowing of all the different hats we had to wear, in addition to, showing up for work and, trying to act like things were normal, which I would say that's, the more grace we can give ourselves, the more that we can advocate for our own needs um, in the workplace and taking the risks to do that, the better that our kids learn from us, and the better that we can show up, for our own lives. Andrea, you said it's sad to see them struggling. My daughter started counseling yesterday. Yeah. And the truth of it is, it's for me, my MO was whatever it takes to help my kids get through this. So that meant I had to lower my expectations a little bit because I was, before pandemic, really, really hard line on technology or gaming. And no offense against, kids that game. I think it has a purpose, but I was very, very hard line about limiting their hours and making sure that they got outside. But when the pandemic started, that meant I had to lower my expectations and really do what I could to just get by. And I think for those of you that, think about how do we do this and all of the mental fatigue, that is it. It's really lowering our expectations during such a difficult time and lowering the expectations for yourself as a parent about all the things that you can achieve, and really picking the most important ones. And it might be day to day, and it might be like week by week or minute by minute, but it's okay. Today, the most important thing is that I make it to my one meeting and that my kids have lunches prepared for their school. So I think that many of us have really high expectations, and that's like, we're going to show up to all the meetings and do all the Zooms and be optimistic and deliver, and also do that at home. And that is absolutely the opposite of what we need to be doing when we are in this really challenging time, being asked to wear 10 to 12 to 15 different hats in any given day. That's really giving yourself the permission to advocate for what you need at work, and also to get help where you can at home. And there's a large part of the pandemic in which we couldn't get help, right? No housekeeping, none of that. And that was real. And so in this phase, it's looking at what do you need, how can you get it, and really getting curious about that. All right. So it's been a lot, that's to say the least. And yeah, parenting is absolutely hard. I know, I have felt, and I feel like this picture is really, it was me and Noah at the start of this. I was like, I am not good teaching or being near my 6-year-old, on Zoom, and he's squiggly and wiggly and wanting to be on my lap, which is both cute, but also can be annoying when I wanted him to pay attention. And so, like some of you have echoed, we had concerns over our kids' well-being and safety, and that still continues. And I think, Kristen, you shared that, which is, them being exposed to the virus, and, maybe that's in a condensed time frame, like 3 weeks, like you mentioned, or just over the span of the year and a half, deciding to send them to school or not. And if the school was open, do you do that? Do you not? What are the pros and cons of all of that? Deciding on vaccinating now, right? Now that vaccines are available to our young kids, do we do that? And the kids' emotional and mental well-being always leading. And then also, how do we get our kids around other kids? And that was much more in the past in terms of when we had to super distance, and our kids are, I think, around other kids now a little bit more, but that was definitely a concern. So let me pause there, right? Let me pause and see, what questions do you have in particular? I'd love to see, like, what comes up for you, and let's unpack some of that. Either put it in chat or come off mute.
Hey, this is Hun.
Hi.
Hi, thanks for speaking to this group. I think it's the parenting tips really do hit home, and your points about lowering expectations is something that definitely strikes me as well. So, tell me about the process in which you decided, or how did you come up with what you prioritize in terms of lowering those expectations? Because I think we want our children to be their best selves as much as our parents wanted, in your example too, to be your best self. But at what point did you decide, how did you go through that process? And then at what point is it appropriate to like come back and say, all right, we're recalibrating again?
Yeah. Such a great question, hun. So for me, it started out, quite honest, I'll be super honest. In the beginning, I thought, like many of you, like, oh, this will be a month or two. You know what? We can keep doing the same. We'll just make it virtual. I'll sit next to him, and I could manage being an entrepreneur, I could manage the work client load a little bit easier. So I was like, okay, I'll be there in the morning with him, with my littlest, while he does virtual school. The other two were old enough that they can manage their own. And then it went on a month, and then it went on 2 months, and then it kept going. And then soon I realized, all right, this is not going to be a short-term thing. So let me get real. What will it take? Because I felt, for me, hun, and I think this is the first point of where do you start, is sitting down and getting real with yourself about what can you manage? What is sustainable for you? And what are your priorities with your kids? Some really key questions. And the answers don't come about unless you just allow pockets of reflection time, okay? So get quiet and reflect and go, okay, when I think about it, what's most important to my kids? And for me, that meant, okay, I want them to feel connected to me because they don't have connection in the normal sense. I want them to know that they can talk to me. I want them to know that I'm there with them through this challenge. That was what was leading for me. So that meant that I had to let go of all other expectations around normalcy, about trying to create a rigid structure, about them doing all things perfectly or right. Meaning, okay, they're going to do an hour of homework or they're going to do an hour of math. I had to let go of rigidity. And sometimes, like a rigid structure or structure is really comforting to me as a former recovering perfectionist. I had to let go of that. And that was really hard. And that meant, okay, what's needed now? I see that my son is melting down. I just need to be with him. I just need to comfort him and ask what's happening. And that meant I had to put on my hat of being a emotional, comforter, or whatever the term is. And it's really just, I think, stripping away what expectations we have and kind of rebuilding. What moment are we in now? How do we give ourselves grace? Then how do we extend that to our kids? And what do they need from us? Does that help? Says, you said thank you. The pockets of reflection are key. You're so right. Different from relaxing and resilient. My kiddos also resiliency of my kiddos, also a reflection on my own resiliency. Yeah. What I realized is that parents are the emotional regulators, especially for young kids. And so if you are feeling heightened and super worried and super concerned, no matter how much you try to hide that, they will feel that anyway. And so the extent to which you can say, okay, my priority is we're going to get through today. And if they need to be playing games in order for me to make that meeting on Zoom, that's what's going to have to be. And know that it's not damaging to them over the long term. We're still just a year and a half or 2 years into it, and we adjust as we go. And I think it's giving yourself the permission to adjust, course correct, admit when you're like, okay, I messed up. I'm sorry, kiddo. I actually meant that instead of an hour on games, today you're going to get 30 minutes, and being able to adjust and give yourself permission to do that. Kids are way forgiving. They're super forgiving. I mess up on the daily, and I just fessed up. I said, listen, Emma, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to be short with you, but I was running from my meeting out the door, and I'll come back to you and we can talk about it. And when you can put words to that, they're like, it's okay, mom. That's all right. And they're very forgiving. So Hannah, I'm glad that was helpful. Anyone else have a question? I'll be mindful of time as well. Let's see. You mentioned companies investing in development, leadership training for directors, VPs. What do you think companies should be doing for managers, senior manager level teammates who are often new to managing teams and people? I think first and foremost, and it's such a great question that you ask, because I think that level of management, managers and senior managers, they need so much support right now. I mean, at all levels, but at the outset, I think there needs to be like one-on-one workshop for managers and senior managers to lead in this time, because it's different. And maybe let me now extend it to all leadership, because leading through this medium and being disconnected takes a very much different skill set and intention and purpose and objectives than leading in person, right? In person, there are some things that are so much easier. And so how do we create engagement and make sure that our people are, not only being productive, but feel like they can talk to us and bring up issues. And so I think that what I would say is companies should really be thinking about workshops or creative ways to get at giving these managers and senior managers skill sets that are really necessary for this time, which is active listening, which is empathy, which is, being able to lead in a virtual medium, which is different than in person. Okay, so I would say, like, let's get all of these managers some support and skills. And the first thing I could think of is workshops and leadership training. Does that help? I would also say that companies should invest in coaching as well, because there's a lot of one-on-one, a lot of great things that can come with supporting leaders one-on-one. So hopefully that was helpful. All right, so here's another question. How do you define balance? What does that look like for you? I think we all might have a little bit of a nuanced definition, or maybe not. Maybe you'll surprise me, but put it in chat. How do you define balance? Let's hear from y'all. Tobiah, does balance exist? I love that you said that. Tandra, nothing has hit the floor. Exactly. Being able to accomplish more than one thing a day. Okay. Audrey, you said feeling leveled and not overwhelmed with tasks. Juggle. Okay. Hun, you said giving each side its due respect. Oh, I like that. It's different. Yeah. And I love asking this question because we all have a little bit of a different spin to it. And all of that is true. All of that is right. Focus on what needs the priority for that moment. Tandra, I want to go back to what you said earlier, which is nothing has hit the floor. Oh, it was Tobiah. Tobiah, you said, does balance exist? Well, I have a unique perspective on that. So I thank you for answering that. And Shuri, you said getting through the workday and still having some energy. Yep. Kristen, you said I feel like I'm in a good state of balance when I'm getting a C+ in all categories of life. I love that. I wonder though if we can do better than C+. I don't know, but definitely. So here's the thing, I think that in this society in particular, we idealize balance, right? We might even romanticize it. We certainly idealize it. This notion of having it all nicely, all going and spinning and all stacked neatly, like in this picture, like the rocks, nothing coming down. There's nothing falling. And I think somebody said it earlier, which is having it all spinning. But if you think about that, and to the point made earlier, is that possible? And I would say no. Okay, so here's some recent stats. This is as of May 2021. We, US service or professionals spend over 50 hours working per week. We spend over 50 hours working per week. Probably some of you more than that. Many Americans work on weekends. 48% of Americans believe that they're workaholics. And 72% of people say that while looking for a job, work-life balance is something they consider. So we know this balancing is important. How do we achieve it? Yet we are spending so much time working. And especially now when burnout is on the rise, it's literally with every client that I talk to, everyone is feeling burnt out. Because the upside of this technology-based work world we're in now is that we can do it anywhere and everywhere. And we literally are doing it anywhere and everywhere with no downtime. And so that's created a feeling of burnout. And so I share those stats with you because it's probably not alarming that we spend so much of our time working. And so balance really is not achievable if we think about it from a perspective of having all the plates spinning. The family life, the work life, the friendship, our spirituality, our emotional balance are, all of the things that we consider the plates of importance. If we're trying to spin all of that and keep it all going, it's really not sustainable. It's not. And I think that the perspective that I'd love to share with you is a different one. It's a radically different way of looking at balance. And there's a term to that. But first, the balancing act. We all try to do this to some degree, whether we admit it or not. We want to take care of our physical needs and our kids needs and the work needs and our partner needs and our friend needs and our family needs and our all of that, and keep it spinning. And like this cat, we're probably feeling grumpy through it all. Here's the thing. The balancing act is very antiquated. It's an antiquated view of how to thrive in today's world. And guess what? It definitely keeps us trapped. It keeps us trapped chasing something that is never really attainable. If we're chasing this perfect balance at all times, something falls, something always falls. And so it is not something that honors our needs and our priorities, but we're chasing this elusive thing because we think we should be balancing. Okay? We think we should be balancing. Instead, and especially now, as we've gone through the 1.5 years of the pandemic, we're still in it, we're not able to balance. And you heard me say that, it's like letting go of the expectations and lowering our expectations. Balance is really, really hard. I want to introduce to you a different way of looking at it. How we move through the world differently. It's instead of work-life balance, it's work-life integration. And when I say that, I want to ask you, what comes up for you when I say work-life integration? Share it in chat. What do you think of when I say work-life integration? No boundaries. Okay, I like that. Balancing the new norm, seamless transition. Okay, I like these. Well, keep those responses coming in and I'll share with you what work-life integration looks like. Instead of, okay, Kristen, you say making expectations known. Instead of trying to balance and keep everything perfectly spinning at the same time based on the shoulds of life, we should be balanced or being showing up for work perfectly. We need to be, keeping our kids healthy and safe. We need to have all the things for us, our emotional connection, spiritual connection, our community, all of that, and all the different shoulds that we have around balancing. That's what we're chasing with balance. Instead of that, how about we let that go and integrate our priorities based on our values? When I say work-life integration, I'm really talking about living from a place of your values, which gets rid of shoulds, not what you should do, not what the good Asian girl so he should do, not what society wants of her, not what we think we should do as women or men or as moms or dads or parents or not, but really from your values. And if you don't know what those are, it's pretty easy to do that. It just takes some slowing down, and there's an exercise on my website that allows you to get clear on what your values are, the top 2 to 3 things, and then integrating that into your life and really taking a hard look at how you spend your hours, which leads to weeks, which leads to months, and seeing if your values show up anywhere in there. Does that make sense? Hear from you. Is any of that resonating? Anything resonating with that? Because I'll share with you how you do that. Here's how we integrate. It's looking at your values. So again, what are those top 2 to 3 things? Is it family? Is it freedom? Is it creativity? Is it connection? Is it community? Is it being in service? What are those values? And combining that with the season of your life, the season that you're in. Do you have small kids? Do you have older kids? Have they left? Do you not have kids? Are you in your early 20s? What is the season of your life that you're in? And then the larger context, adding that in. We're now going through and navigating, hopefully, the end of the pandemic, marrying that, and then that drives your priorities. It's not trying to balance all of the shoulds. It's really leading from a place of here's what I value and how I'm going to incorporate that into my schedule. And that is driving your priorities, right? So that's the formula. Here's what it really looks like. It's, again, step one, getting clear on your values, really ridding yourself of all of the shoulds of what you think society wants of you, what you think you should be doing. Don't should yourself. And then looking at your weekly schedule, what do you notice? How are you spending all of your time? Is it working 80 hours a week? And you value, one of your values is health and fitness. Is that showing up in your schedule? If not, how can you start incorporating that? And the point is to wake up and notice what you're consciously and unconsciously choosing to do, right? That we have so much more power in our choices, and that if we're intentional and purposeful, that we can live from a place of integration rather than balancing all the shoulds. And wow, how freeing is that? How freeing would that be? So let me pause there. What questions are coming up for you as I share with you kind of the macro, the formula, and then how you actually live from a place of integration? I know many of you have to hop off. That's okay.
Zoe, I just had a question. I mean, being of Asian descent as well, I think there's part of me that feels a little guilty, when I prioritize everything else over work, but I honestly don't feel guilty that way. So it's one of those push-pull things, you play in your head that, yeah, I should be doing this, but it's better I don't do it right.
Yeah, I love that. And what I hear in that is like you're getting honest with yourself, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Reality for sure.
Yeah. Good. Thank you for sharing that. And you know what? The shoulds are so ingrained in us. I mean, we live in a society that tells us we should be a certain way, success looks a certain way, um, and that's not our fault. It's our context. It's the world that we're living in. And so step one is really being aware of that. And then dipping into kind of your inner self and figuring out, okay, well, what do I really value though? Getting curious about that. And I think there's so much power in curiosity. Alyssa, you said, I feel like there's a balancing act as well between my values versus my family's cultural values. Yeah. Well, I think that, it's hard to take them apart entirely. And that's not the point. The point is, what's more true to you, right? Is it, for me, one thing is freedom, and that equates to travel and or pursuing this career was something that I advocated for. And it's like taking those small risks, but it doesn't happen without really getting clear on what your values are, which some of that might bleed into your family's cultural values, and that's okay. It's okay. Getting curious. All right. So when I say integrating, it really is about taking a hard look at how you're spending your hours. And is there any part of your schedule that if you value connection, where you can build in more of that for yourself? Connection could be picking up the phone. Connection could be doing a walk and FaceTiming somebody that you haven't talked to. Whatever connection means to you, it's making sure that that's actually built into your schedule so that you feel more integrated versus living out of shoulds. Okay, so hopefully that's clear. So in addition to integrating, a big part of living a life that's integrated is advocating for yourself, right? Because that's based on what you prioritize and what is of meaning to you. So that means you have to advocate in different aspects, whether it's at work, in your personal life, all of the above. And so how do you do that? And I'd love to hear from you. And this was a poll question. Now I guess we're turning it into just a question, which is, how do you advocate for yourself now? What are the ways, whether they're big or small or in between, that you have advocated for yourself? And it could be at work or outside of work, but I'd love to hear some examples or read some examples of how you've done that recently. How have you advocated for yourself? Anyone want to come off mute and share? Or maybe it's really hard to think of that because we haven't put it into practice recently.
This is Alyssa. I can share very quickly, like one of the ways I advocated for myself. I think, with all that's happening with the pandemic, I think in this last year, I've had more conversations with my manager than I ever had, like in all previous 4 years combined. And there were a lot of very honest and vulnerable conversations about hey, this is not working out. We have less people, more amount of work. It seems like my days have just increased the number of hours in the day that I'm working. We were talking about this earlier, with Craig as well, or now that there's no commute, there's no natural stopping point between your morning or your day work plus the Asia time zones, right? So then it's drawing that line of hey, I'm going to take a break at 6 p.m. or else I'm just going to not stop working ever. So I feel just having those honest conversations and then drawing those hard boundaries.
Yeah, Alyssa, oh my gosh, it's such a perfect example of the ways in which we've had to do that on the daily, especially at work. Because you're right, we've had all of our natural transitions, whether it was through the long drive in or short drive in or walk into work or whatever that looked like, those were natural transition points, and that's all been gone. So now we're on here all the time. And so it's having those real, sometimes challenging conversations about what you needed, which is, my hard stop is 6. I gotta, get to everything else. And that is so critical when you know what you need, being able to articulate that. And my guess is that your manager was probably pretty amenable, right, Alyssa?
Yeah, he was super open and he, we were doing check-ins as a team as well. So me raising that meant that other teammates who hadn't previously voiced it also got the quote unquote benefits of that So yeah, he was very open, very flexible, and we tried our best to have more of that like work-life integration. I'd like to call it a work in progress. I'm not going to say everything's been resolved.
Yeah, it is a work in progress, but my point is this, is that sometimes we make these, like if we want to advocate for yourself, we want to have a courageous conversation to do that. Sometimes we make it so big in our heads and it gets overwhelming and it can feel very nerve-wracking. And then when we actually take that action, that micro action, and have that conversation, it's more times than not well received or received better than we think in our own head. So I love that you're continuing that conversation. That's a really good example. Thank you, Alyssa. And then Julia, you said realizing when a workload is too much for myself and reminding myself to ask for help. Asking for help. I got to tell you, I have like a help button all the time because I'm the first one to realize when I get overwhelmed, it's when I haven't asked for help. And so yes, realizing and then advocating for yourself in that way is such a great example. I love that. Thank you for sharing. So here's what I think is really the key to advocating for yourself. It's first, it's action, right? There's an action to this. As we said, Alyssa took action to talk to her manager, but really the key thing underneath that is a belief that you're worth it. Whatever you're advocating for, there has to be this baseline belief that you are worth that. Whether it's asking for a mental health day, or you need to leave at 5 or be, at work at 10 the next morning for whatever reason, it's knowing that it will be okay and that you trust yourself and a belief in your worth. There's a layer of self-confidence there. It's the inner work that is so important to be able to take action. Okay, I hope that makes sense. So there's two things that really are the core to advocating and starting to do that. The belief and then the action. So it's knowing that your point of view and knowing your value, it's knowing that it's worth it, and that taking action on that will progress you forward. Okay. So here are some of the steps that I've outlined in terms of trying strategies. One of the big things, if advocating for yourself is an area where you'd like to develop more, I would say start with finding a work tribe, or what I say, your own internal advisory tribe, a board, right? It's those people that you can go to bounce ideas off of. And sometimes advocating for yourself is a community thing in that you can get help from other people, whether it's feedback or they can advocate for you. So know that it isn't always just a solo act. It's one in which you can get help from other people too. So I always say, if you don't have your internal advisory board, and I'll show you exactly what that looks like, start to build that, because it always is helpful to have an internal advisory board. The second thing is get clear on what you need and want. So really, like that example that Alyssa shared, she knew she needed some boundaries with work and when to stop and like go on to something else. And so what is it that you need and want? And then believing that that you are deserving of that, and practice asking for it. And sometimes getting somebody you trust to like bounce ideas off of in that practice, and actually saying it, is helpful. And then it's taking that small risk or the bigger risk, and what I call micro actions, and doing that step by step. And each time you do that and advocate for yourself in small ways leads to bigger ways, leads to bolder ways. And so this is a method that I found really helpful, especially having your own internal advisory board that can help be a sounding board for you when you feel uncertain, and can sometimes boost you when you need that. Does that make sense? So what does an internal advisory board look like? Well, one, I would say find somebody that can be a connector for you. It's somebody that's well established in the community, maybe in their field, and seems to know people. They're really good connectors, and those are people that you see maybe in the workplace or outside that you're like, wow, it's like 3 degrees or 6 degrees of separation, and everyone seems to know that person. So they might be a good person to pull into your internal advisory board. There's the accountability master, somebody that holds you to the task and gives you the nudge to get you moving towards a goal. So sometimes you might need that person that's like, all right, Sohi, let's get real here. How are you going to work towards it? What are your action steps? And they can help you move along, right? So that's the second one. I love that, Lizzie, you're shouting out to your mentors and friends. Yep. The third person might be the shoulder to lean on, because sometimes you might need somebody to just really listen to you and not necessarily give you advice, but just be able to take that in and empathize with your situation. And they play a really unique role in allowing you to feel heard and allowing you to come up with creative solutions, because ultimately, as adults, and my coaching belief is that you know the answers. Sometimes we just need somebody to really hear us to be able to process. Then you have the dreamer, somebody that thinks big and believes in you in really big ways. And this is a really good person that can help you advocate for yourself and help you get clear on what that is. Okay. The dreamer is, I think, really a special person that just like, oh my gosh, I believe in you. I see all of your unique potential and talents and makes that visible to you. And then we have the mentor. Yes, it's a sounding board, someone to listen to, and they can give you actual like lived experience, like somebody that's maybe in your same career path or a career path you want to follow or somebody that you admire. They can create that safe space for you to discuss ideas and also give you honest feedback. So a mentor is somebody absolutely that you should include in your internal advisory board. So those are the 5 key things, and you don't have to have all of them. It's not about, making sure that it's all neat and tidy, but just if you know these people, ask them to like that, let them know that you look up to them in certain ways and the ways in which they provide you guidance. So you can say, I really want to talk to you, Alyssa, because I feel like you can be such a good mentor to me. I don't think anyone will be turned off by that. So keep this in mind as a way to get feedback and hone in on what you want and practice how you want to advocate, and really start to cultivate an internal advisory board if you haven't already. Very useful thing. They can help advocate for you and with you. Okay. So I'm just doing a time check. I think I'm past time. Is that right, Alyssa, or am I right on it?
Yeah, we're 3 minutes over, but it is totally fine. I think you did an amazing job. Your content is so valuable. So send it back to you for you to wrap this up.
Okay, great. So you all asked questions. We definitely want to do a book giveaway. And Alyssa, maybe you can help me figure this out in back office or just offline. The person who asked the most questions, or in essence, the most person that put stuff in chat, we can figure that out. And then the person who shared something they're going to do or act on. So the question is, we'll give a book away to somebody that's actually going to take action on or implement something as a result of being here today. And you can put that in chat if you're going to do something as a result of listening to this talk, being here. We'll give a book to somebody that is going to do that. Anyone?
Yeah, and also I don't want to put the time pressure on people to come up with what they're doing next. So if you want to follow up via email, so maybe what we can do is just give everyone like a week. So by end of next week, we'll just announce who are the 2 people getting the book giveaway.
Perfect. Thank you for that. Yes, great way to end. And please feel free to connect with me. I am on Instagram. You can see that handle. I'm definitely on LinkedIn. You can find me through my website. I would love to continue the conversation with all of you. Connect with me. And it was such an honor and pleasure. And I hope this was valuable and helpful.
Thank you, Sohi, on behalf of LEAD, of everyone here in this call, everyone at Under Armour. This was super helpful, super valuable. And folks, don't forget that we will be doing like a follow-up call with Sohi probably in December. And there will always be, more to come if everyone's interested in the topic. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a great day and weekend.
Yes. Happy Friday, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.